Hello there, this is Ted over at Futurescape. In this tutorial I'm going to show you how to do basic file repair in SpaceClaim. So the majority of this tutorial we're going to be spending in the Repair tab. So oftentimes this here is a parasolid file, so oftentimes we will get a file sent to us by a client or a customer, and what happens is some of the geometry is broken on that file, and we need to do a little bit of repair on it before we can manufacture it or do whatever we need to with that part. You'll notice when we import this part, it comes in as this kind of translucent, transparent shape. That usually is an indicator that the file, the model is not a solid. As you can see in the structure tree here, it's actually just a bunch of surfaces, which means that it didn't come in as solid geometry, so there must be something wrong with the geometry. So in the Repair tab, we have a bunch of automated tools to help fix it. So I'll walk you through sort of the typical workflow for a basic file repair. If you're interested in sort of more advanced file repair techniques, I will be producing another video shortly going over sort of more advanced techniques. But in this video, we're just going to go over the basics. So first of all, when you look at the Repair tab, the workflow usually goes left to right. We start with the stitch gaps, missing faces, and then if we need to do further sort of modifications, repair work to the file, we continue along to the right of the screen. Using the tools that we need to as required. But first we're going to start with the Stitch tool. So I'm just going to select all those surfaces, and I'm going to try to stitch them together, because sometimes what happens is you'll get a file and it loses those edge definitions, those edge connection definitions, so it gets broken up into a bunch of surfaces. So sometimes just doing a stitch will fix it, will return it to solid geometry. So I'm just going to hit stitch, and it's going to do its best. Now stitch it all into one surface, which is a good start, but it is still a surface. We want this to be a solid, not a surface. So that indicates that there are some other problems with the model. Now it did stitch together we had 7 surfaces before. It stitched those all together, so it's starting to come together. There's still a little bit of work left to do. So that we have defined our edge connections, but there must be some missing faces or gaps in the model. So we're going to then use the gaps tool to try to find any gaps. Now you'll notice when I clicked on that, it says no areas found. So there's no gaps in this model. At least none that are smaller than 0.1 millimeters. Now if I increase this value, I might be able to find some more gaps, slightly larger gaps. So basically, what a gap is going to be determined by sort of the scale of your model and what you consider a gap. So you see there I changed the maximum distance to 0.5 millimeters, and that it found these 2 sort of gaps. We might also consider this here a gap. It might be big enough to consider a gap. Basically, the difference between a gap and a missing face is in the eye of the beholder, or in terms of SpaceClaim, is determined by this maximum distance here. So if I set this to something higher, like 1 millimeter, it might find that extra one there. So I'm going to just increase that to 1 millimeter. Now it found that other area there. So any of the areas that it considers a gap are going to be highlighted in red. I can go through and I can click on these individually to patch them in, or I can just hit the green check mark and it's going to try to fix all 3 gaps. Now sometimes it'll fail, sometimes it won't manage to repair those gaps, in which case you'd have to go through and you might have to manually repair. But we always like to try it just to start, just to see if it'll do it, and it seemed to fix it there. So it got rid of those gaps, but now you'll notice it's still not solid. So what we need to do then is try the missing faces tool, and right there you can see when I click on that I do get some missing faces. So I'm just going to patch those in. So click on that, patch it in. Click on this to patch it in, and so on and so forth. Now that I've done that, of course, I have a few sort of little imperfections, but I do have solid geometry. So I could stop here and that would be fine. However, I'll show you a few other tools that we can use to sort of clean up the geometry if we want to, tidy this up. So, for example, we want to get rid of these little slivers here. We can do a merge face and that kind of thing. So first, let's take a look at the split edges. We'll see if we can find any split edges, and it does find a few split edges. These are any areas where you have sort of a split in the line. So, for example, here, if I just back out of this and hover, you can see that this line highlights in yellow. So we have there a discontinuity in the geometry, which you probably don't want because this is one face here. The face isn't split, so we shouldn't have the edge split either. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to again click on split edges and fix that edge. And I can fix all the other edges too by just clicking on that green check mark. So I'm just going to zoom out here so I can see what I'm doing. Hit that green check mark, and it's going to go through and try to fix up those problem areas. There were two that it wasn't able to fix. That's pretty normal when you're doing this kind of work. Sometimes it'll try to fix it, it won't work. There's a number of reasons for that, which I won't go into in this tutorial, but it will try to do as much as it can. So now I'm done with my split edges. I could go in and try to fix those manually, but I'm going to leave it alone for now. It's not the end of the world if I have a few split edges in my model. And then I'm going to search for extra edges, which I don't think there are any. Oh, okay, there's one extra edge. That's usually just a case where the edge geometry or the edge definition has been set twice for whatever reason. So we can get rid of that, and that takes care of that extra edge there. It says no extra edges to remove, and you'll see that here when I got rid of that edge, it actually patched in that extra face there. It merged those faces together. Let's do a search for duplicates. This is just any areas where we've got a duplicate face or faces been defined twice in the same region. That we didn't find any in that model. Finally, if we didn't, for example, this face here, we probably want to merge these together. We're going to click on the Merge Faces tool, and then we're going to select this face and this face, merge them together just by clicking on the green check mark. And then it merged them together like so. The other thing we could do is we could search for small faces in the model. And I don't believe it's going to find any. No, it didn't find any. But if I go back a step here before I did that merge, if I do a small faces, it might find that. Let me try it right here. No, it didn't find it. So then in that case, I would just do a merge again, since I wasn't able to use the small faces tool. That's the basics of file repair. There are a bunch of other tools here, small faces, simplify, inexact edges, these kinds of tools that you can use to do additional patchwork. But the basics that we covered today were basically stitch gaps and missing faces, and then you can go through some of this other stuff if you want to clean up geometry. But just to get it into a solid, you mainly just use the stitch gaps and missing faces. So I'll put together a video later going over some of the sort of more advanced, more manual techniques for when the auto tools don't really work for you. But I hope this tutorial was helpful and that you got something out of it. Thank you very much for watching.